Hello, it's John Heaton, and today I'm going to get back to doing other stuff other than the Beatles lyrics stuff I've covered in the last 4 or 5 videos. So I'm going to go back to Bob Dylan. One of the few albums I haven't reviewed of his is this album, The Times They Are A-Changing, which came out in January '64. And it was his 3rd album following the self-titled debut and Freewheeling, which had come out in May '63. And this was Dylan at the height of his protest period, if you want to call it that. I know he didn't like being called a protest singer. In fact, when he was asked in an interview, are you that? He said, no, I'm a song and dance man. So maybe that was a bit later on, but he never entirely happy with that label, although it's interesting that the title track was more or less a deliberate attempt to write a kind of anthem for the times. In fact, when a friend of his saw the rough draft of the song, and he said, what are you writing that for? And Bob said, it's the kind of thing people seem to want to hear, which I thought was quite interesting. So this album is pretty consistent, but I'm going to focus this review mainly on looking at 3 tracks in detail, which is the title track, With God on Our Side, and The Lonesome Death of Hattie, Carroll. Just to say a bit about some of the other tracks. I mean, the Ballad of Hollis is a heartbreaking tale about people in poverty driven to do desperate things, and One Too Many Mornings is an affecting ballad which he would revisit on the '65-66 tour, and also on this tour. I think it's on this tour, is it? One Too Many Mornings. Well, it's not actually on this album, as far as I can see, but it was definitely performed in '76, and it's on the Hard Rain album of the Rolling Thunder, the second leg of the Rolling Thunder tour. And done a much more up-tempo version is done there. Only a Pawn in Their Game is a bitter comment about how it's not really people's fault because we're all the pawns in the great scheme of things in some grand game organised by the government or the powers that be or anything. It's a bit of a conspiracy theory song, and not one of these. I'm not really big on us being a pawn in the game of governments and all that, but I suppose a lot of people out there do share that opinion, so I respect your opinion. Boots of Spanish Leather is quite a moving ballad along the lines of, you're going away for a while, what can you bring me that I would like back from your travels? And he ends up saying Boots of Spanish Leather. Quite an affecting love song. When the Ship Comes In is again another moving song with a slight biblical connection perhaps, with the ship coming in perhaps representing the Saviour coming to save us all. And notice one review likened this to William Golding's book Lord of the Flies, where the guy who comes to rescue them on the island is dressed in a white cloak, and he's ultimately coming to judge these group of choir boys who've got stranded on the island and turned into savages. Anyway, I thought that was quite interesting. Restless Farewell is a late addition to the album by all accounts, and I enjoy it thoroughly. Nothing specific to say about it lyrically, but I think the album really got its reputation probably because of the title track and With God on Our Side and the Hattie Carroll song. So it really is a glorious anthem, and he's done it in concert ever since, really. Come gather round people wherever you roam, and admit the waters around you have grown, and accept it that soon you'll be drenched to the bone. If your time to you is worth saving, then you better start swimming or you'll sink like a stone, for the times they are a-changing. Maybe that's a comment on the generation gap, and the parents, the children rebelling. I'm not sure, maybe one of the other verses is, I can't remember. Come writers and critics who prophesize with your pen And keep your eyes wide, the chance won't come again. And don't speak too soon, for the wheel's still in spin. For there's no telling who that it's naming. For the loser now will be later to win, for the times they are a-changing. Come senators, congressmen, please heed the call. Don't stand in the doorway, don't block up the hall. For he that gets hurt will be he who has stalled. There's a battle outside and it's raging. It'll soon shake your windows and rattle your walls, for the times they are a-changing. Brilliant. One of Dylan's best early songs, if not best of his ever songs, really. With God on Her Side is not so much a dig at religion, but a dig at country, specifically the US, not just the US, but in the early verses the US, justifying the wars that they fought by saying that righteousness is on our side and therefore justifying what they did. And he's slightly ironically pointing out that fact and probably not agreeing with it. Who knows whose side God is on in these conflicts? Maybe some wars are a little clearer than others in that respect, but others are completely ambiguous. Oh, my name it is nothing, my age it means less. The country I come from, it's called the Midwest. I was taught and brought up there, the laws to abide, and that the land that I live in has God on its side. Oh, the history books tell it, they tell it so well. The cavalry's charged, the Indians fell. The cavalry's charged, the Indians died. Oh, the country was young, with God on its side. Oh, the Spanish-American War had its day, and the Civil War too was soon laid away. And the names of the heroes I made to memorize, with guns in their hands and God on their side. Actually, sorry, I thought it was missing a few verses, but they're on the next one. The First World War is covered next. Oh, the First World War, boys, is closed out its fate. The reason for fighting I never got straight. But I learned to accept it with pride. For you don't count the dead when God's on your side. When the Second World War came to an end, we forgave the Germans and we were friends. Though they murdered 6 million in the ovens they fried, the Germans now too have God on their side. This was written in the early 60s, so only about less than 20 years since the end of World War II, and maybe some people thought it was a little early to forgive and forget, despite what the Christian religion might tell you. And then it finally gets on to the Russians, the Cold War period, which had just started around this time, or had been going for a few years. I've learned to hate Russians all through my whole life. If another war starts, it's them that we must fight. To hate them and fear them, to run and to hide, and accept it all bravely, with God on my side. But now we've got weapons of the comical dust. If fire them we're forced to, then fire them we must. One push of the button, and a shot the world wide. And you never ask questions with God on your side. So that's a reference to the potential nuclear holocaust at the press of a button. Now this is probably the most memorable verse for me. Through many dark hour, I've been thinking about this, that Jesus Christ was betrayed by a kiss. But I can't think for you, you'll have to decide whether Judas Iscariot had gone on his side. Very thought-provoking. So now, as I'm leaving, I'm weary as hell. The confusion I'm feeling, ain't no tongue can tell. The words fill my head and fall to the floor. If God's on our side, he'll stop the next war. I think that last verse was added on later, actually. I don't think it's on the original. And also, I think he added a verse for the Vietnam War in the sort of late 70s. I think he came up with that verse. So that's a great song. And now I want to cover the Lonesome Death of Hattie Carroll, because I've been aware of this song loosely about what it was about, but I did quite a bit of research about what it was covering, and it's basically a loosely factual depiction of a real-time event, the death of a woman called Hattie Carroll, who's a 51-year-old African-American barmaid in Baltimore, who died in '63 at the hands of William Devereux Billy Zinger, who turned up drunk to some event and with a toy cane and ordered drinks off her and started shouting abuse to her, and then hit her over the shoulder and over the head with his cane. And although the blow itself didn't leave a mark, she was so traumatized by his verbal assault on her and by this cane, being hit by the cane, that she collapsed a little bit later and was taken to hospital and died 8 hours later. So he was charged with murder first, later reduced to manslaughter, but then only got a 6-month sentence. Clinton Halen in this book is saying, great song though it is, it's a gross misrepresentation of the facts. Well, I think Dylan took a bit of poetic license, but I wouldn't call it a gross misrepresentation. I think he changed his name, maybe deliberately, to avoid libel, from Zantzinger with a T to Zanzinger. He said that she had 10 children, maybe she had 11, but I don't think that changes the overall narrative of the song. And then he talks about first-degree murder, when in actual fact he was first of all charged with just plain murder, and then it was changed to manslaughter. But I think at the time the authorities bent over backwards to prevent a race trial being held in Baltimore, which probably might have incited riots, and gave him what could only be seen as a very lenient sentence. And they even delayed his sentence by 2 weeks so that he could reap his tobacco harvest on his giant tobacco farm, which was 600 acres. He's a very unsavoury character who died in 2009. He was later done for fraud as well. His then wife, Jane, I think her name was quoted, "Nobody treats his niggers as well as Billy does around here." As for Zantzinger himself, he was interviewed by Dylan's biographer and said, "The song is a total lie. It's actually had no effect on my life. He's a no-account son of a bitch. He's just like a scum of a scumbag of the earth. I should have sued him and put him in jail." I think later on in an interview before he died, he did acknowledge the fact that he caused Hattie Carroll's death. If only indirectly. I think his actions did lead to her death, and the fact that he was drunk at the time I don't think is much of an excuse. I think he was certainly in control. He certainly could remember what he did. I don't buy the fact that he was so drunk he can't remember anything. And the words are very effective. The first verse covers the event, the second verse covers Zantzinger, the third verse covers Hattie Carroll, who, by the way, is never mentioned in the song that she was black or that he was white, but it's fairly obvious, and with a little bit of research one can establish the true facts of the case and how Dylan used poetic license to make it more of a message song, perhaps, because it was very timely. I mean, timely is the wrong word. It was a very traumatic time in the civil rights movement, and the day that Zantzinger got sentenced was the same day that Martin Luther King made his "I Have a Dream" speech in Washington. So the chorus goes, "But you who philosophize disgrace and criticize all fears, take the rag away from your face, now ain't the time for your tears." I was listening to a commentary on this on YouTube, which said that maybe the point of that line is to say, those of you who want to make this into a race story, don't do that. Remember the humanity of Hattie Carroll. She was a real human being, and don't generalize and make it into a black versus white thing. But having said that, at the end of the song, in the last chorus, he does change the words. But you who philosophize disgrace and criticize all fears, bury the rag deep in your face, for now's the time for your fears. So this was after the sentence had been passed. He's saying, yes, indeed, there is a time for mourning, and for mourning the loss of a human being, and also the failure of the justice system of the US at the time to give an appropriate sentence to what was, if not murder, pretty close to it. I'm not a lawyer, and I don't agree with Clinton Halen saying that, great song though it is, Dylan's errors, or whatever he calls it, are unforgivable, and he continues to perpetuate these myths about poor William Zanzinger. You know, to call him poor is ridiculous. I mean, if there was a loser in this case, it wasn't Zanzinger, for sure. His reputation tarnished by Bob Dylan's garbage. So basically, Hattie Carroll is the heroine of this song, and she's the one who's going to be remembered. Zanzinger might be remembered for being the villain of the piece, but at the end of the day, this is a remarkable song about the civil rights movement, written at the height of it, and it's one of my favourites, and I'd always liked it. And I love the version on here, which is a much rougher version. But I've been going back to the original, and also heard a great version by a band called Cage the Elephant, an American band, and another good cover version as well. I can't remember who else covered it. American singer-songwriter guy whose name escapes me now. But nice. Both versions bring out the tune perhaps a little more successfully than Bob's original, but been going back to the original as well on this album and listening to it. It's an immensely powerful song. In fact, it's an immensely powerful album, driven, as I say, by those three masterpieces. So that was Bob Dylan, The Times They Are Changing. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.